Welcome back. So let's continue. So I would like to add a view name. So view name code. This will be a string. And we can say the following. So if name is empty, then let's return my mesh view. Else, let's return the following. So string interpolation name view. Now, we could also consider at a later point to have some kind of validation to check if name is a valid identifier, right? Or we can assume that the person who is entering the name into the text field is a programmer like ourselves, and they're not going to enter something, say, something that's not a valid identifier. For instance, something that starts with a percent sign and it has spaces. However, this is something to keep in mind that to do, maybe add some validation. So to do add identifier validation. This is something that I have done already. For now, we'll just keep things simple and progress. Okay, great. Now let's move on to our code variable. Now, currently our code variable is quite simple. It just returns the mesh gradient. Okay, so I would also like to see the case where extended code is true, and then we want to import SwiftUI. I'm going to use a multi-line string to express this, else return mesh gradient. Okay, and somewhere in here I want to have the preview, ignore safe area, etc. Now let's go down to our demo code in the comment over here. So we have import SwiftUI, struct WinView, a preview. I'm just going to copy all of this, literally all of this, and paste it into our code right here. And let's start altering this. Now, everything involving the mesh gradient can be removed because we already created this. Right, so let's just be careful. Press enter. Now, instead of wind view, I want us to use the view name. Okay, so view name code. And let's see what we have. So that looks decent. Originally, I added some tabs. And now let's try to add mesh gradient code over here. And also I see a wind view down in the preview. So we could alter that. And now let's try to drag this into our wind view. We're pretty much done. Maybe we want to check the indentation if it's okay, but we can always, work on tweaking this further. Okay? So let's split the screen again. I want to be next to the wind view. Let's delete everything in the wind view. And now I'm going to drag this in to here. And first, let's see if it compiles. Maybe it doesn't compile. And it doesn't compile. Okay, so we have an issue here. So if we're off by just a little bit, so cannot find wind view. Okay, so the error is very clear. So we have, I added view twice. I don't need to add view over here. Okay, so so you see how important it is that we can test our code. So I'm going to undo all of this. Go back to code view. Make sure we split the screen. Make sure I'm in the wind view again. Okay, great. This is exciting, the moment of truth. So let's drag this in. This time it compiles and it works correctly. Let's hide the preview. Let's look at the full screen and look at the result. Okay, it looks all right. This indentation doesn't look good. This indentation doesn't look too amazing. Neither does this. Okay, but technically this is functional, so we should be satisfied. In any case, we can try to improve this slightly. For instance, I created a helper function to indent every line of a string. So we could create such a function. Let's say function, let's call it indent, which accepts a string and returns a string. So we're going to go through this quickly because really we want to move on to other topics. So I'm going to grab the components separated by new lines, and we're going to have a result, which is an empty string, and say result plus equals to lines dot map line in. And I just want to apply double tabs. So double tab. And maybe if we would have done things different earlier, things would look better. So one has to kind of tweak this to get it just right. And joined by a separator of new line. Okay, and one should test this out and return result. And now if we go up, back up to our code over here, for instance, instead of the mesh gradient code, we could enter indent string mesh gradient code. And really the best way to go about things is just to tweak it and experiment. For instance, in my code, I have a \t here, but things are a little bit different because originally I just, flattened everything and just added tabs. So I'm going to undo that. We'll go with this for now. If necessary, I'll tweak it further. We can take a quick glimpse at the preview, but we should be happy with our result. I think all in all, it looks okay. Again, we can make an effort to improve things just a little further. Let's go to the mesh gradient code. For instance, if we start moving this to the left, yeah, I'm looking at the preview. It makes it look a little bit better. I'm curious what would happen if we just take all of this to the left. Doesn't look too good. So one sees one has to do some work. Perhaps I could make this screen bigger and then, things would look a little bit better. Let's look at points to code, right? If we apply indentation to that, so string points to code, okay, maybe that's better. So all I'm saying is that one has to work a little bit to tweak it just to get it right. So I'm going to undo this, and yeah, we can tweak this later, or essentially I'll just make sure that the project files, indent very nicely. For instance, also the colors, perhaps we could add a little bit more indentation for the colors. Okay, so we have colors as code. What would happen if we were to add another tab over here? Okay, maybe it's a little better. I think it is a little bit better. Okay, great. I think this is sufficient. And the only thing we really didn't take care of here is this to do, add identifier validation. Now, I don't really want to deal with this now. However, we will find a compromise. So what I'll do is the following. I'll go to our main folder, add a folder called extensions, and let's create a string extension that at the moment we'll just test is empty, and later we can make it, a proper email validator. Okay, so I'm going to go to extensions. Let's press Command N, create a Swift file, and let's call this email validation. Okay, so we can have an extension of string, and we want, I'm just going to test is empty for now, and let's define this to be a variable is valid identifier. This will return a Boolean, and let's say self is empty means it is not valid. So I have to capitalize bool. Okay, and now we have to implement this in the future. For instance, make sure it's not a reserved keyword. The first letter is a letter or an underscore, and the rest are characters, which are, letters, digits, or underscores. Okay, so we need to do a test for keywords. But if we want to do it right, it is a little bit involved. 2 starts with a letter or underscore. Of course, it has to be non-empty. I should have mentioned that first. Remaining letters or remaining characters is a letter, digit, or underscore. And of course, the first thing to check, of course, is that it is non-empty. Okay, so we're not going to do that now. Again, this is really a minor point, but as long as we have is valid identifier, then anywhere we use it, the moment we update this extension, our code will work. Okay, so it's really good that we did create this extension. Now let's go back to code view. Okay, and now I can just say if name is a valid identifier, use my mesh view, otherwise use name view. And we could also use this, do the same thing with a ternary operator, right? If it's valid, use my mesh view, otherwise use name view. And maybe you don't like the fact that I'm forcing the word view onto the name, so then we can remove it, right? Because I am kind of restricting things, right? Our views will always end with view. Maybe you don't want this, okay? Or maybe, you want to add the word mesh at the end, say mesh view. So we do have a lot of freedom, okay? We do have a lot of freedom here. I'm just going to leave it as view. And great, that pretty much sums it up for the code view. So have an amazing day, and see you next time.